Welcome to Kase Filters UK's Sunday session. You're very welcome. My name is Ruth Taylor. I'm here tonight with Nick Livesey. Nick, you're welcome as well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. It's nice to talk to you.
It's nice to talk to anybody, I think, at this particular time in the pandemic. I'm going to just speak to you in a few minutes properly, Nick, and introduce you properly. But first of all, just for everybody that is tuning in, just a couple of items of housekeeping, basically. If you've been here before, you'll know how it works. But basically, there's a live chat box. If you want to use that to ask Nick all the difficult questions through the next half hour or so, you're very welcome to do that. There is a few seconds delay just between people putting questions in there and them coming up on our end. So just in case we don't get to those straight away, that is all that is. And also just to let you know that if you want to watch this again, you can on the Kase UK YouTube page, basically what you're on right now. It'll be available to watch just pretty much as soon as it's finished. And also if you missed any of the old ones and you want to go back, check any of those out, they are also on the page. So there we go. Just some basic housekeeping. Anyway, Nick, it's a pleasure to meet you. Mountain lover, mountain photographer. I mean, first things first, Nick, you're based in Snowdonia, but that is definitely not a Welsh accent that I'm hearing.
Well, it's a funny one because I'm originally from Manchester.
Yeah.
But I left when I was
not
a
a land
small...
of mountains.
No, not really. But we do have the rain there.
You do?
I grew up in East Anglia in Cambridgeshire, which is the flattest place in the world.
The hottest place?
Flattest.
The flat? Oh, is it really?
Oh yeah.
Flatter than Snowdonia, anyway, I would say.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's a bit strange that I came to live a life which is centered around the mountains.
Yeah, no, I mean, talking of that, Nick, I mean, it's super obvious for anybody looking at any of your videos, any of your images on your website, just how much you love the mountains. And obviously you say you're not from Snowdonia. How exactly did you get started in photography, and how did you end up in Snowdonia?
Well, I got started in the mountains, really. I started in the mountains about 20 years ago, walking, then scrambling, rock climbing, winter mountaineering, and going through the sort of mountaineering continuum, if you like. And it blew my mind, and I thought it was wonderful, and it changed my life completely. So, you know, like an evangelist, I wanted to tell the world, and I wanted to be a writer, but I couldn't do that because I've got no GCSEs or anything like that. So I thought, you know, there's no bar to entry in photography, so maybe that's the way. You know, any idiot can do it.
Any idiot can do it. I like that.
You know, I'm the living proof. So I thought that'd be a good way of doing it. And strangely enough, I've come full circle. And as well as being a photographer and a mountain leader now, I'm a writer too. So it eventually happened.
Yeah,
20
absolutely.
years later.
I mean, how long ago was it since you ended up in Snowdonia?
8 years I've been here now.
8 years, okay. Yeah, loving it?
I adore it. I adore it. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life here. And when I die, I'm going to be taken in a little box and sprinkled out onto Moyle Shabod, which is just over there.
Fantastic.
It's my life.
I love it. Nick, I mean, most landscape photographers, they love a moody scene, I would say. You know, most of the images that you see, you know, it's the grey, it's the bad weather. Obviously, you're in the mountains a lot of the time. You're not necessarily just looking at the mountains, taking pictures. What are your favourite shooting conditions? Because obviously being up there in amongst, you know, particularly moody conditions can be quite dodgy if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, if you don't know what you're doing, you know, it is dangerous potentially. But these days I don't have any ideal sort of shooting conditions. I used to like the moody skies, golden hour with the little letterbox magic slot thing on the coast. That used to be my favourite. But the thing with that is, if you're shooting in ideal conditions all the time, you're never going to improve as a photographer.
True.
So it's good to go out when the conditions are suboptimal with no expectations and just work with what you're given. Yeah. And that's what I'm sort of into now. And I'm moving away from the more massive, spectacular light photographs because you get bombarded with them all the time. So I find quieter photographs a bit more interesting now and a lot more challenging to pull off.
I mean, that is very true. You mostly what you see is the grand landscapes. It is the spectacular light, especially if you're up in the mountains and stuff. I mean, is that a challenge, being able to get kind of more intimate landscape type pictures in amongst the grandeur?
It is for me because I don't necessarily connect with the smaller details. You know, I trample across scenes which more sensitive people would have a tripod set up at. So I'm trying to be more observant, and lockdown helped me because I took more time to learn about the botany of the area, you know, the flora and fauna, rather than the big chest-beating mountain vistas. So it's been great to sort of upskill myself in terms of my general knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, do you find there's a good response to that type of photography? I mean, obviously the people, the social media lovers, you love a grand landscape, of course you do. But what really struck me is when I was looking at one of your Facebook photos, and you took a picture of what was essentially a tree on a hill in lovely light. And to me, I thought that's the kind of thing I would want to stop and take a picture of. But it's not the kind of thing you would maybe feel like would be received amazingly. But I really appreciate that. What's the response been to that?
I'm not sure of the one you actually mean, but in all honesty, Ruth, I don't really care what people think. It's always nice to get loads of likes, and it does make us feel a little bit validated at times, but I'm doing it for me. Yeah. So really, I'm not that concerned about what other people think. You know, I mean, I sell quite a few prints and that. So to me, the people who want to hang it on their walls, they're the important ones.
Yeah. I'm just someone tell me I've got two microphones on. Apologies about that. Hang on a sec. Is that better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
I can hear you now, so that's not so good. Hang on a wee sec. Not sure what I'm doing wrong. Apologies, everyone, if you're getting double me. But you might have to cope with that for a little while. Nick, sorry about that. Listen, we were talking before we started, just briefly, as everybody does, about the past year or so. The pandemic, obviously, been very difficult for a lot of landscape photographers, obviously because workshops is one of the main ways that you make our living. And I think, like everybody, for the first couple of months when you live in a location like you do and like I do, where there's lots of tourists around, it's kind of fun having the place to yourself, be able to go out and, if you happen to live in amongst the landscape, to be able to go out and take pictures of that. I think at this stage, people are desperate to have people back. I mean, how's your work had to change in the past year? Or has it just been a case of, getting through the year till the tourists are coming back?
Well, luckily, I've got sort of several income streams. I write for magazines, I've got print sales, and I've got the book as well, which still sells regularly. So I've not done a lot of photography, to be honest. And on the times where the lockdown has briefly stopped, I've managed to get a few days out with people, but it's been tough. Money wise, it is tough. Every month I'm trying to pay me rent, and it's not easy, but I always do it. But I feel very, very blessed, and especially at the start of the lockdown when the place was empty, it must have been like what Snowdonia was like in the 1950s.
That's exactly what we were saying up in Skye, yeah, 1950s
and
style.
watching the spring from start to finish, because it was remarkably beautiful.
Yeah.
And just a chance to slow down for a while and take stock. And I would have hoped that the wider public as well would have learned something from having our freedoms taken away and maybe cherish the things more that they took for granted. So when they do return, I hope they respect the place, and we can be respectful to visitors and they can be respectful to our home, Yeah,
absolutely. Nick got a question in on the chat here from Philly. Says, can I ask Nick what his opinion is on Cliche locations and images?
It's up to you. I used to be very sort of moany about it, but really, I think you've got to do what you want to do. It's not for anybody else. If you want to go and shoot the lonely tree in Llanberis, then go and do it. My pleasure comes from exploring corners that I've never been to before, rather than visiting, scenes, which is strange because my book, Photographing the Snowdonia Mountains, is exactly that. Go here, go there. So I'd be a bit of a hypocrite if I said you shouldn't do it. But you do what you like. Do what makes you happy. Life's too short.
Yeah. Julian is asking you, Nick, I think you're learning Welsh, apparently. Do you have a favourite saying? And no, okay, I should preempt this by saying, Nick, it's there's no watershed on the internet, but even so, just to bear in mind.
Well, the saying I say most is probably "Mae'n ddrwg gen I, sais ydw I ddim siarad Cymraeg yn dda," which is basically, I'm sorry, I'm English and I don't speak very good Welsh.
That's all you need.
Yeah, goes a long way.
That's fantastic. Nick, artistically, when you go out and about taking pictures, are there any particular artists that you're inspired by? I mean, photographers, obviously, or maybe even just painters, musicians, anything like that? Or is it just a case of you trying to capture what you see in your own particular vision of that?
Well, I'm not really inspired by visual arts, to be honest with you. But music has always played a very large part in my life, and I was a professional musician for a number of years.
Okay.
During early lockdown, I discovered it again after about 15 years away. So to me, what I find inspiring is beauty, and I find that in landscape in the first person rather than photographs, because it's a sensory thing. You're using all your senses, and you can't do that with a photograph. But I'm really into things like the late Romantic period composers like Rachmaninoff, Mahler, and I just love really romantic, slushy music, which people wouldn't think, because I've been thought to have been quite abrasive at times and a little bit prickly, but I'm not really. I just like beautiful things, but I prefer the oral, experience rather than the visual one.
I mean, I actually love that about your videos, that the music you choose is exactly like that. It's very majestic, very beautiful.
Well, most of it I wrote.
Did you?
I did most of it myself. Yeah, so
it's fantastic, may I say. Congratulations, and that's what I mean. Just the fact that you're choosing that particular music to go with, beautiful sweeping, imagery and drone shots of the hills. It's just so obvious how very much that you love those mountains, and I love the fact that you say you want to be buried up there, or sprinkled. Sprinkled.
It's about being emotionally honest, and it takes guts to show the soft side of you. Men are supposed to be big and tough and all the rest of it, and not cry and not feel anything. So it takes a lot to put yourself out there. Absolutely. But I've always had to do what I need to do. I can't do it any other way,
Be yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Even if it's cheesy, there's nothing wrong with cheese.
Absolutely, and it gives everybody else permission to be their own cheesy selves as well. Post-processing, Nick, I'm going to make a wild guess that you're maybe like most of the landscape photographers that I've chatted to so far. Do you favour the minimalistic approach? Would that be accurate, or do you have a particular take on how you edit your images?
Personally, I like to keep it minimal, and I really want them to look kind of natural if possible, which is difficult in the digital medium because sometimes they come straight out of the camera. The raw files look really digitized and digital and lack some kind of organic quality. So it can be tricky. Obviously, some scenes, some images take a lot more work than others, but I'm not into creating things that I didn't see. It's about conveying what was there and how it felt to me at the time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, how long would you spend, say, on it? Say you've gone out for the day, you've gone out to get a particular image. How long would you spend maybe editing that? Or does it just depend on, the image?
Well, it does depend. I mean, a tricky one might take half an hour. I mean, most of my time spent removing dust spots.
Okay.
But no, I mean, you shouldn't really need to do too much unless you're really trying to create a piece of art. And I'm not. I'm trying to put these mountains out there when they're looking quite nice, and 10-20 minutes. It shouldn't take any more than that, really.
Clean up all the dust spots and just tidy up a bit. I love it. Memorable moments, Nick, good or bad, when it comes to photography. Do you have any stories that you'd like to share?
I've got too many to mention, really, but I think on the negative side, I came into photography from mountaineering. And there was a period in my life where I was going out into the hills, and if I didn't come back with an image, I was really upset. So after a while, I had to have a good talking to myself, because if your enjoyment of the outdoors comes from the images that you get, then you're going to be disappointed a lot. And that's not what the outdoors are for. They're for rejuvenating your soul and making you happy, and getting away from all that acquisitive stuff that we feel that we've got to own things and achieve things. You don't have to. You can just go out and enjoy. And now I think I've got the right balance. If I don't take a photograph for a few weeks, I don't mind. My camera's not going anywhere, the landscape's not going anywhere, and I don't feel the need to constantly put things out to social media. I mean, I think that's I suppose what I'm saying, Ruth, is when I came to that conclusion that I was being a bit stupid about it all and the balance was all wrong, that was a really good time, because then I felt that I was free, you know what I mean?
Yeah, you got it right. I mean, what everybody I've spoken to so far has said, you have to be passionate about the subject first. I know you can learn the photography, you can learn the technical stuff, but you need to have that passion for your subject for it to come across in any of those images. That's so important. Yeah, I mean,
If you're not
that to me
passionate
is,
about it, how can you expect a viewer to be?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work right.
It's the first thing I would say about your images. Just the first two or three, it's like, this guy loves the mountains. And as soon as you know that, that speaks to you, more than, not saying the images are not, exactly correct technically, but they are. But that's, to me, is the most important thing, knowing that the person who's taking the picture is loving being there and just wants to show off, which I think is what you're so good at, showing off the area that you love.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased that comes through.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely it does. I mean, speaking of, pieces of advice, and that obviously a hugely important thing. In fact, I think one of the things you once said about mountain photography in particular, and I quote you, "It's a long apprenticeship and there are no shortcuts." I mean, when it comes to people who are starting out, either in landscapes or in mountains, do you have a particular piece of advice that you would give them, or would it just be, be passionate about your subject, or is there any kind of tips or anything else in there as well?
Well, be passionate about your subject is fundamental. But I would say to anybody that's thinking of getting into landscape photography, stay away from camera clubs because they'll not do you any good. Just get out and practice, take photos of anything, learn how the camera works. And if you're going into the mountains, start slowly. Don't commit yourself to, potentially dangerous things because you want to go to this honeypot location.
Yeah.
Take it easy. There's no rush. And the journey is much more exciting and rewarding than the destination. Because I don't think I'm going to get much better as a photographer now. I think that's it. I've got to where I'm going to get, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So it's not quite as exciting as, and enjoy those first 2 years when you're discovering it all, because it's so fresh and the possibilities that open up to you. It's a really wonderful period. Don't let that pass you by. Enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a question here from Richard. Has passing your ML mountain something? I'm guessing. Has that influenced your photography in any way?
No, not at all, because I've been in the hills for like 17 years before I did my ML, so I was pretty well versed in it all. It just means that now I can charge people for it legitimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Passing on those skills. Nick, one of my favourite things I've seen you do, you wrote a love letter to one of your favourite hills, which I just think is absolutely fantastic. So, I mean, we all know that you love Snowdonia, but I mean, inside Snowdonia or away from it, is there any particular location that you would love to visit, mountains or otherwise, just with your camera?
Well, I've answered this one quite a few times before, so I'll be brief. But there's lots of places I want to go to. There's lots of really nice roads in Scotland that I've not done yet, including the ones on the Black Cooling and Blathen and things like that. But I wouldn't really want to go there for photography because it doesn't fit a narrative. When I look at my body of work, it's not a collection of disparate photographs. It's the story of my life living in this place. So photography as a tourist for me doesn't really appeal. But the mountaineering I'm still very, very fond of. And I'd love to go and, there's a few in Torridon I haven't done. And there's just so many in Scotland. But in Snowdonia, my favourite place is the Hrynogydd, which English speakers usually call the Rhinogs or the Rhinogs. Okay. And it's like a piece of the Northwest Highlands dumped into North Wales. It's incredibly wild. It's wonderful. And it's still reasonably unspoilt and rough. But that's where my heart really is, the Hrynogydd.
Dean would like to know, Nick, how do you think landscape photography has changed in the last 10 years and how do you see it going in the next decade?
I see it disappearing up its own bottom unless there's a real sea change in people's attitudes, because there's so many great photographers out there these days. You can learn on digital really quickly. And it just really, I think it's lost its value. People don't want to pay for images anymore. And I don't think it's particularly interesting anymore.
Do you think it's just going to disappear into the ether with the, the abundance of people doing it, with the abundance of, smartphones and social media? I think people just, it doesn't have the same wonder for them perhaps that it did in, kind of Colin Pryor days.
I don't think you will. And I do think it's wonderful that it's become more egalitarian and more people can get involved. It's easy to be elitist about it and think, oh, well, that's for me. I don't want anybody else doing it with their phones and all that. But it depends what you want to accomplish with your photography. If you want to do it as a career, then I think you're going to have to get a particular niche or combine it with something else, because I think the bubble's about to burst.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, isn't it, career-wise? Say, as we've been saying, workshops are one of the main things that people, is the obvious route down. And obviously you've released a book and things like that as well. But, for anybody thinking of transitioning from what they are doing to becoming a landscape photographer, it's not easy, is it? It's not a constant source of money coming in. You got to really love it.
If you're looking at landscape photography as you're going to sell your images and that's all you're going to do, then you're living in cloud cuckoo land. It's going to be very, very difficult for you. So if you can write, that's really good. You can write for photography magazines. You've got to do other things if you don't want to be stuck doing weddings, which, however lucrative that might be, it's not for everybody.
It's not for, and some people love it, and absolutely fair play to them. But yeah, you're right.
It's a good job they do.
Exactly. Nick, you do have a book out. Tell us about that.
Well, it's one of the photo view guides. I think there must be about 10 of them, and I've got one here actually.
Oh, how convenient.
Photographing the Snowdonia Mountains.
There it is. Wow.
And I'll send you one if you like.
Oh, please, that would be amazing. I mean, I'll get a link off you later on for how people can
I'll send you
on
one
and find that.
It's basically 15 mountain walks, but it's got loads of information about mountain safety, clothing, the weather, technical aspects. It's a really, really thorough book
as well. Yeah.
So if you get that book, you don't have to hire me as a guide because it's all in there.
We'll edit that part out. Nick, Julian would like to know, what's the funniest moment this is an interesting question. I've not had this one before. What's the funniest moment you've had on the mountains or in the hills? Does it involve a cow pat and a vape?
No, I mean, it could involve me having to go to the toilet at short notice and the amount of lens cloths that I've lost due to that.
Oh, no. Thanks for that image.
No, I do have occasional... I have mind bleach. That's what you need, mind bleach.
Mind bleach, I think so.
I have occasional misadventures with animals, be they feral goats or cows, because I do try to keep out of their way. And it usually causes me more trouble than it's worth. But there are several instances. I won't go into them. But I get myself into a right state sometimes trying to avoid these animals. That's
hilarious. And I now realise why people have 100 lens cloths in their bag as opposed to just one or two that they reuse. Nick, do you have a shot in your head just now that maybe it's something you've been thinking about for a while, that there's various conditions that have to come together for that to happen? Just a shot maybe on an ambitions board, or is it a case of just going out and seeing what you come across and not making the best, that sounds bad, but trying to take images of those? Do you have those kind of ambitious shots that you're waiting to get anywhere?
Not anymore.
No.
For years I did, but there comes a time where you've got them all, you've achieved them, and I much prefer to just go out roaming and be reactive. I used to think that you were only allowed to sit behind a tripod for 3 hours thinking about a shot that you'd visualized for the past 3 years. I thought that was the only way you were allowed to do it, and I did it myself. But I realized that there's many ways to do it, and I wouldn't want to be too prescriptive about what I told people to do. It's what works for you, and I prefer it now. I don't use a tripod very often now either. I carry my camera in a holster, and I like to anticipate what's just about to happen. And because of all the experience of years of composing images and really taking your time and learning the craft of composition, you find it's a lot easier to be reactive. But then I think if you're going to break the rules, you really do need to learn them first. It's like any craft, really. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, that's unusual especially for a mountain photographer, I would think, to go out without a tripod and just to, like you say, be reactive. That it takes, as you say, learning the skills before you can actually do that, I think, to any decent degree.
Yeah. It's like playing an instrument. The more proficient you get technically, the freer you can be with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, favorite Kase filter? Do you have one, or is it wherever suits at the time?
I have. Now, I've got this 5-stop grad, which they made for me.
They made it for you specially.
Because when I was using Lee filters, which are lovely, by the way, I used to use a 0.6 and a 0.9, and everyone says, "Oh, you're overgradding." I'm like, "No, I'm not. That's how I do it." So when I got involved with Kase, they made me a 5-stop grad, and it's absolutely brilliant. And in lockdown, I smashed it. And I know you're not supposed to smash it, but
You can't smash
the
them.
Wolverine, no, the whole tripod went over.
Oh.
But they gave me a new one. But that's not my favourite. I have to say that the new magnetic polarizer is my favourite. And I was never one for polarizers, but it's so cool. I just leave it on all the time, you know, and just adjust to taste. But it's wicked.
Yeah.
I love
Fair
it.
enough.
The whole system, the Kase system's fabulous.
I mean, is the 5-stop, is that just for you, or is that available anywhere?
Well, I don't think anyone else would want one. They'd tell, you know, these arbiters of what's right or wrong would tell you that, you know, it's too much, but I like it.
You're afraid, you know what, and as you say, it's, you know, it's what works for you, so
yeah.
Fair play to you. You've mentioned the guitar a couple of times, Nick. Besides photography, which obviously is a passion and good out in the mountains, do you have any other hobbies or interests that you have time to do?
I'm really interested in drinking wine. And I recently discovered Buckfast and couldn't believe how gorgeous it was.
Buckfast? I've heard of that for a long time.
Yeah, well, you're missing out.
I thought that was a Glasgow only thing. Obviously not.
No. Julian Baird put me onto it.
All right.
But no, apart from that, my life is very simple. I go out for a walk, I drink wine in the evenings, and I compose orchestral music. And I write my little articles, and I just live in this little mountain bubble in this 250-year-old cottage high in the hills.
I've seen a few drone shots of it. It's just that's you living your best life.
I think so. I think so. And if I died tomorrow, I'd be happy.
Just make sure you leave a note for somebody about that box that you need sprinkled up the hill there.
Well, I tell everybody I meet. That's why I mentioned it, just in case you're the only one left.
Fair enough.
So it's Moyle Shabod. It's the one out the back of mine.
All right. Well, we'll trek up there. Listen, Nick, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I mean, just before we go, just, you know, obviously lockdown's finishing off. Looking ahead, do you have any plans or projects beyond, you know, just kind of trying to get the customers back in? You've obviously got a book out already. Do you have any other kind of ambitious projects in mind?
My ambition really is just to live out my life as happily and healthily as I possibly can and enjoy every minute of it. But less hippie-ish, I have got another book that I'm working on for PhotoView at the moment.
Okay.
And the last year has kind of buggered that up, but we'll get it done eventually.
Absolutely. And Nick, where can people find out about your existing book and about you in general? Have you got a website, social media pages?
I've got social media pages, Nick Livesey Mountain Images. My website is nickliveseymountainimages.com. And my other business page is discoversecretsnowdonia.com, which is my guiding business.
I was going to ask about your guiding. You offer the guiding as well as, you know, as not just the photography workshops, but mountain guiding as well.
It's more photo guiding, taking people to places that they didn't have the confidence to get to safely on their own. Yeah. So just looking after them. I really like that.
Brilliant. All right, listen, Nick, thank you so much. It's been honestly a real pleasure chatting to you tonight. And thank you to everybody as well who's been listening in, who's been asking questions. We are going to be back again in a fortnight, in 2 weeks' time, March 28th, I think that is. And we have got, just double checking, we've got Vanda Relevska, who, among other things, is a seascape photographer based in London, which is fascinating to me. So very much looking forward to chatting with her at the same time, 7 p.m. right here on the Kase UK YouTube channel. So do check that out. As we said at the beginning, if you want to watch this session again or you want to share it with your friends, you can do that. It will be available in just, I think, a few minutes here on the channel. So have a wee look for that as well. Kasefilters.com is a place to go for schedule details of our upcoming sessions, as well as loads of other stuff. So feel free to have a look at that. But from me and from Nick as well, and from the whole team here at Kase UK, thank you for being here, and have a great fortnight till we see you again. Good night.
Bye.